essay, I will show, through the comparison of both texts and their similarities and differences, that one can function effectively as a continuation of the other, as well as both authors' works having the ability to stand by themselves. Hello, people of the internet. She's back again with another video, and I'm very excited for this one because I spent a lot of time planning it. So Madeline Miller is Rick Riordan for the Percy Jackson kids. This whole video stems from an Instagram post I saw that said that Percy Jackson kids are now Madeline Miller stans, and I went, that's true. It is very true. And so now I'm going to talk about it today. So I'm a Percy Jackson kid. It was my favourite series as a kid, and I still really love the books. And recently I also read both Song of Achilles and Circe by Madeline Miller. Also really loved them, and noticed how they really reawakened my love for Greek mythology. A lot of people have compared the two a lot on BookTube and Instagram and TikTok. Well, I don't know about TikTok. I wanted to talk about why they're so similar in difference and how we can see the impact that both have had upon the reading community. Slight spoilers for Percy Jackson and the Olympians, as well as Song of Achilles and Circe. I'm not gonna talk as much about Rick Riordan's other series. I'm gonna mention them, but there won't be any spoilers for that. One of the major similarities, aside from the fact that they're both obviously based on Greek mythology, is the structure. They follow the structure of Greek myths, in that there are lots of little side quests that they do leading up to a big quest. In Madeline Miller's work, this is inherent because she's retelling the myths. In Rick Riordan's case, this was a deliberate choice. In The Lightning Thief, where, you know, Percy and the crew, they go on all these little quests that build up to when they finally go to Hades and they get the lightning bolt and they have all that big end confrontation. And I think this is really interesting to see how the forms taken in both texts are similar, and the way that you read them and go through the journey therefore feels very similar to a reader. Circe tells a lot of different myths from the perspective of Circe, and therefore we get lots of little narratives woven throughout the story, going from her perspective and looking at a broad range of Greek myths such as Prometheus, Medea, the Minotaur, Daedalus, well-known myths that we find in Greek mythology that Riordan has also used in a lot of the Percy Jackson books as well. For example, in the Battle of the Labyrinth, about Daedalus's workshop and his big labyrinth, or the Minotaur in the first book, and a lot of these little elements of mythology that's included in both of the works. I think one of the other main similarities between the two books is that they're both very accessible to people. In the case of the Percy Jackson books, obviously it's made for kids. So Rick Riordan writes the myths in a way that kids will understand and sparks their interest in history. Madeline Miller does this in a similar way, in that you don't need any knowledge of Greek mythology to read her books. But with both authors, if you do have that prior knowledge, there's Easter eggs in there and little things that you're gonna understand, and it's gonna increase your perception of the book and the perspective that you have on the stories that are being told. But again, you don't need to know that, and it can act as a great introduction in both cases to Greek mythology. So you can also see that the authors are really starting to create a world and that they reference things in other books. Obviously, in the case of the Percy Jackson books, it's a very long-lasting series. Characters pop up a lot in later books that are a bit like cameos, but even in Circe, we can see with Odysseus showing up, and that if you had read Song of Achilles first, you knew a bit more about Odysseus's character and his role in the war. People are going to keep getting drawn in. They feel like that they're being immersed in a whole world that these authors are creating. Obviously, one of the main differences is the audience that the authors are writing for. So in Rick Riordan's case, he takes the myths and he simplifies them into something that kids will be able to understand. Madeline Miller really stays true to the original form of the myths. It's in this case that Madeline Miller often has a more historical focus in her stories. She depicts things from history such as the war camps, the styles of fighting, geography and geology of ancient Greece. The backgrounds of the authors also plays into how their stories are constructed differently. Rick Riordan was an English teacher, and he was writing this book for his son, who had ADHD and dyslexia. Madeline Miller studied classics, and so she was writing her books as a way to retell the stories in their true original form, but in a way that's accessible. One of the big things about Riordan's books is the way that he uses it to discuss social issues in a way that kids are going to be able to understand and introduce diversity and inclusion to them at a young age. People and kids can be able to see themselves in these characters and think, you know, this thing that's different about me, maybe it's not a flaw, maybe it's the thing that makes me a hero, maybe it's the thing that makes me special. And I think that was really special about his books, and the way he's continued to increase the diversity and inclusion in his characters as he's been writing. He uses it to talk about social issues, but in a way that's really accessible for children, and really showing that, you know, kids aren't too young to understand these things if you explain it in a way that they understand. Miller as well has the diversity and social commentary in her books, just in a very different way, such as Achilles and Patroclus. She's not changing it from the original story, because like that's how it was, and she's just really saying it like this is how it was. Both authors, this is again a similarity that they use their work to talk about social issues and make social commentary, but they again do it in a different way based on their target audience and their intentions behind the book. So, we've discussed the similarities and differences. We can see that there are a lot of similarities, and a lot of the differences that we can see between the two works are often due to the intentions behind it, the target audience, and the backgrounds of the authors, and how this influenced the way that their books and stories are constructed, and the way that we as readers digest and perceive them. We can start to see where one might be a continuation of the other. The way that we would immediately think about it is that Percy Jackson is for kids, Madeline Miller's is for adults. It's really like moving up in school, from primary school age books to high school age books. One of the ways that we can see this happening is that Miller takes the knowledge that kids might already have from Percy Jackson, and she expands upon this. The mythology that she describes is in a much broader sense. She doesn't cut out any of the brutal bits that might be a bit too much for children, but she's able to really paint a whole picture of the mythology and the history, and take the knowledge that we already have and build upon it. This can obviously be seen in a comparison between Percy Jackson and The Last Olympian and the Song of Achilles. We get a little bit of the Achilles myth in Percy Jackson. For me, that was where I had a rough understanding of what the myth of Achilles was about. But when I read Song of Achilles, my knowledge of the myth and the story surrounding it really grew a lot bigger, and I had a deeper understanding for what the heel of Achilles actually was, and the stories that surrounded it. Returning to Percy Jackson, knowing the full myth and the importance it has within Greek mythology, we can also see the wider importance of Percy getting an Achilles heel and what this means within his world. One of the other reasons that Madeline Miller's work is very much a continuation of Riordan's is that she takes more nuance with different characters and the way that we perceive the world, which Riordan does, but again, he does it in a way that's accessible to children, and we can see this through the character of Circe. So Riordan doesn't immediately paint people like Circe as villains. He allows a little bit of uncertainty with, okay, like they've done these bad things, but these bad things also happen to them. But Madeline Miller really gives a whole view of Circe as a human being in Circe, and we really, from seeing through her perspective, we get more nuance in her role as a villain in Greek mythology and in some of the stories that we've encountered in Percy Jackson, and really examining that, you know, she did bad things, but she didn't just do bad things. Like, she did some good things, and that there's really no right or wrong here. She's not a villain, she's not a hero, she's just a person. Because people aren't good or bad. People are whole people. I think this is really interesting, especially in the case of Circe, and comparing it to the Circe we see in Sea of Monsters, where, you know, she turns all the pirates into guinea pigs, whereas in Circe, she turns them into pigs. And I think what's interesting here as well is that for Percy and Annabeth, obviously, it's not good that Percy got turned into a guinea pig. However, Riordan doesn't immediately paint Circe as, you know, she's a terrible person, none of these people deserved this, by saying that, you know, the pirates were not good people, which we can also see in Heroes of Olympus. We get a little callback to this. He isn't just depicting Circe as a villain. He's allowing a little bit of nuance to a level where kids will be able to understand it. Whereas in Circe, Madeline Miller really gives the whole story here and lets us understand why, you know, it probably isn't good to turn people into pigs, but this is why she did it. She's not just doing it for villainous reasons. So apart from one obviously being a continuation of the other in terms of reading level, the reason why Madeline Miller is so much like Riordan for the grown-up Percy Jackson kids is that it takes something that was a comfort childhood book and turns it into something that you would read as an adult. So Percy Jackson kids immediately took to Madeline Miller because she took these comfort stories and took them up a level. It's like a comfort read in the term of an adult novel, taking something familiar and increasing the critical viewpoint of it on mythology and being able to give you a deeper and broader understanding of the Greek mythology that our favorite childhood book was based upon, and really allowing a more nuanced viewpoint of the Greek myths, which I think is also interesting to go back and read Percy Jackson again after reading, you know, Circe and Achilles, especially Circe, and rereading The Sea of Monsters. Something that is very interesting to consider with both of these books is the immense popularity that they have. Obviously, Percy Jackson is very popular, and it's had a lot of years to gain that popularity. Madeline Miller's works is also very interesting to see how they became popular quite recently. She's only got 2 books out, and yet they're very popular. And the role that social media has played in this for both works and how it's differed. Saying that, there are so many books and series on mythology. Why are these ones so popular? Percy Jackson has had many years to grow its popularity. Riordan has created an empire. He has the original series, the Heroes of Olympus, Magnus Chase with Norse mythology, the Kane Chronicles with Egyptian mythology. He's also got Riordan Presents, which is presenting a lot of other types of mythological retellings. So he's behind a lot of things that are involved with mythology. Madeline Miller has only written 2 books so far, but you can see how she, again, as well, is looking towards building a whole world within her literature. You can also see that Madeline Miller's books are very quickly gaining popularity, especially The Song of Achilles, and the fact that it's a TikTok book. And not gonna lie, I picked it up because it was recommended so much on BookTube. I think it's really interesting to see the influence that social media has had on the popularity of both of these series and how it's differed due to the time period. TikTok last year obviously became very popular due to the pandemic, and BookTok became a thing. I don't really know, I'm not on TikTok, but Song of Achilles was one of the TikTok books, and it became very popular, and it was very popular on BookTube as well, and Bookstagram and other types of social media. Percy Jackson became popular in a time when it wasn't really the cool kids getting into these types of social media, such as Tumblr or, you know, Wattpad, where it was really starting to gain popularity and build a fan base. Whereas at the moment with TikTok is incredibly popular with everyone, especially concerning the, you know, worldwide pandemic. TikTok became very popular at this time. I think also the layout of TikTok and how it recommends videos to everyone on the For You page, and that maybe people who wouldn't usually be searching for book content, it found its way onto their page and they watched it, and maybe they decided to pick up a book because of it. And with Percy Jackson, the people who read it as a kid, they didn't pick it up because of social media. Maybe they read it through school or through parents, or they saw it in a library. They only went to social media later, you know, with the whole fan base that was starting to grow on there. And the differences between this, I think, are very interesting, a lot to do with the age and also the time period in which social media was seen as either cool or not cool, and what types of it the cool people were on. And that reading has become a bit more popularized recently. As you get a bit older, you know, people want to read. They think it's cool, especially with all the popularization of things like That Girl, for example, or the perfect morning routines in which people get out of bed and they read in the morning and they don't go on their phone. Perspectives are shifting, and how reading isn't seen as something that's nerdy. It's seen as something that people want to do. And I know that this isn't just because of the time period, it's also because of age, and that when you're the age in which you read Percy Jackson, maybe reading still isn't seen as cool. So these series, for some reason, have really been chosen by the book community online to be at the forefront of books about mythology, and have really been prominent in the conversations we have about mythological retellings, and how they're really something that a lot of other mythological retellings are immediately compared to. I think it's really interesting to see how a lot of Percy Jackson kids have gravitated towards Madeline Miller's works, and that how we really see them as, you know, a step up in age, and how I hope that, you know, the kids now who are reading Percy Jackson, when they get a little bit older, they'll become more interested in Greek mythology and come across Madeline Miller's books and read them as well. Because there's really nothing wrong with expanding your knowledge of history and learning more. And if both of these authors have done that for my generation, the upcoming generations, and sparking their interest in something that maybe they might not have picked up on. Thank you and good night.